Hello friends, Alex here with StepByStepMusic.com. In today's lesson, I'm going to teach you about modes. I'm going to tell you what a mode is, I'm going to tell you how they're commonly used, and I'll tell you how to think about them. Let's get going. Okay, get ready. Here comes the big secret. A mode is a scale. It's as simple as that, except it's not as simple as that. A mode is when you play a scale that you already know, some existing scale, we'll say the major scale, and you start on a note that is not the first note. So what if we played the major scale, C major, from C to C? Okay, fine, that's the major scale. But what if we started on D? If we start on D and play from D to D, using only notes from the C major scale, that would be a mode of that scale. So if we look at a piano keyboard, or a picture of a piano keyboard in this case, I can see my C major scale very easily. It's all the white keys, all the natural notes. That makes up my C major scale. So easy to see the notes in the C major scale. Normally, if I play the C major scale, if I'm asked to play the C major scale, I start on 1. This note is C. I'm going to call it number 1. Well, I've got the second note and the third note and the fourth note all the way on up. And when I get to number 8, that's the same as the first note. That's a C again. Okay, that's my C major scale. But if I start on this note here, if I start on D in this case, or number 2, and I play all the way to this D, or this 2, then I will have played the second mode of C. So I've played the notes of C, starting on the second note and going all the way to the second note an octave higher. So a fair comment at this point would be, well, isn't that just the C major scale starting on a different note? Well, yes, it is, but I want this scale to exist in its own right, in its own world. So I don't want to think of this note, this D, I don't want to think of it as a 2 anymore. I want to think of it as a 1. And here I've got a bass fretboard. We can see the same thing going on. I can see that it's not linear like the piano is, but I can go ahead and circle all of my natural notes, and that would be a C scale, right? And I like to have these in a tight little position here so that they're easy to play. So what if I took all those notes and I moved those up to D, and I said, no, I'm not going to start on C, I'm going to start on D. I'll move them up here, and I'll circle all the natural notes again. So I'm starting on D this time, putting myself in a position where I can kind of reach all these notes fairly easily, and you'll see the pattern has really changed. This is easier to see on the fretboard than it is on the piano. So I see the pattern has really shifted compared to my original pattern of the major scale. So, like I say, I want to think of this scale in its own way, having its own distances between each of the notes. So if I write these out linearly, this is what I come up with. I have Ionian. By the way, when you talk about modes, everything gets its own name. So the major scale, if you think of that as a mode of itself, I suppose, you would call that Ionian. That's just a fancy name for it. And all these modes have fancy names, but we don't really care so much about that today. We're trying to get the concept of modes. So conceptually, I've got a whole step between 1 and 2. This is my major scale. Whole step between 2 and 3. 3 to 4 is a half step. Whole step, whole step, whole step, and a half step between 7 and 8. As usual, this will be available in the description for download if you want to go ahead and grab this sheet. So when I go to my 2 mode, I see that the distances are different. Now, if I were to start on 2 and I were to go I would go a whole step to number 3. Well, I see in my 2 mode, if I call number 2, if I call that 1 now, because I'm thinking of it as its own mode, I've got that whole step, right, to number 2 of my 2 mode, the 2 of the 2 mode, right, which is the 3 of my major scale. These are actually the same note. In the key of C, these would both be an E. We had a D before, right? D over here, and then an E as we start to play out the scale. So in the major scale, from 3 to 4, well, that's just a half step. So that would be an F in my C major scale. And here, again, if I'm thinking of D as 1, because it's its own thing, it's its own mode, it's grown up, it's moved out of the house, it's got its own thing going on, right? So when I go to my third of my D scale here, using all notes from the key of C, then that's just a half step. So that third, though, because D is a big boy and D gets its own 1, that third is no longer a third. It's a flatted third because, of course, in scale degree world, we always measure these things when compared to the major scale. We're going to come back to the concept of scale degrees at the end of the lesson when I teach you how to think about these modes, how to memorize these modes. How do I use these modes, you might ask? And that's a fair question. The primary use for modes is to stay in key. Now, they have a lot of other uses that we can nuanced uses that we can use them for. But our first priority when learning modes is usually to stay in key. So if I have a C chord, I'm in the key of C, I have a C chord, I want to use notes primarily from that key because I want to stay in key because the style of the music demands that I stay in key. It wants me to stay in key. Well, what scale would I use to play over a C chord? Doesn't matter what instrument I'm playing, saxophone, guitar, I don't care. What scale do I use? Well, C major scale will keep you in key. Okay, well, no, the whole band moves to a 2 chord. They move to a D minor chord in this case, second chord in the key of C, second triad in C major, in any major key. And I want to solo over that. I want to go ahead and play some notes over that, write a melody, create a solo, whatever you're doing. Doesn't matter what instrument. And I want to stay in key. Well, if I play a D minor scale over my minor chord, that's going to actually pull me out of key. I'm going to end up playing a B flat on that D scale, on that D minor scale. And I don't want to be flat. I want to stay in key. I already said I wanted to stay in key. So I can use my 2 mode to play over D to stay in key. And I can use my 3 mode for my 3 chord and my 4 mode for my 4 chord. And each of these modes not only stays in key, but gives it its own flavor. And if you play just major scales over major chords and just minor scales over minor chords, like 99.99% of the time, it's going to sound terrible. And that's sort of our default when we're learning to play music. We go, I know the major scale. I know the minor scale. I'm all ready to go. Give me some major and minor chords to play over. And that's just not how our ears are used to hearing music. That's usually not the result that we're looking for. So we pull modes in so that we can stay in a given key. Modes have a ton of other uses, by the way. The like I said, the first and primary one is just to keep us in key. But once we learn the modes and we know them well, they can start to take on a life of their own. They can be used to emulate styles, such as blues typically uses a Mixolydian mode or the 5 mode of a major scale. Funk music tends to be in Dorian, our 2 mode of our major scale. So we can also write music in modes. So I could write a piece that is in Dorian where that 2 mode actually sounds like 1. And again, it would take on this life of its own and give the song or the piece that I'm writing its own flavor, its own character. So there's a lot of different ways we can use modes aside from staying in key. So now you know what a mode is, and you know where modes come from. You also know why we want to learn modes in the first place. So last part is memorizing them, understanding them in the easiest way possible. Here, I have all my 7 modes of my major scale. So I've got 8 notes in the major scale. The 8 is actually the same as the first, so I've only got 7 notes in the major scale. That gives me 7 modes, where the first one gets this name, the 1 mode, or Ionian. It's just the major scale. And then I go down the list, and I have all these different shapes that come out as I start to play all the notes of some major scale, starting from different notes. So my 4 mode, my 5 mode, my 6 mode, my 7 mode, there's my 7 mode. These are all coming from the same scale, and these all yield different results. So how do I learn them? First, I want to talk about tonality. So each of these modes will have either a major or a minor tonality, and I have that listed up here. And because I love color coding, the major modes are in blue, and the minor modes are listed in purple there. What makes a mode major or minor is the third. So if my third is a regular third, scale degree 3, or 2 whole steps from the root, that's a major third. That's going to be a major mode or a mode of major tonality related to the major scale. And if we look at the third and it's flat, or it is a whole step and a half step, step and a half from my 1 of that mode, then I have a minor mode, or a mode of minor tonality. So step 1 is to learn which are my major modes and which are my minor modes. My major modes are 1, 4, and 5. Everything else is minor. Pretty simple. And here's the secret sauce. I'm going to learn my major scale really, really well. If you haven't done that, do that first. And then I'm going to learn my minor scale really, really well. If you haven't done that, do that second. Okay? Once I know my major scale, I call it my gold standard. And I know my minor scale, I call it my silver standard, because they're the standard that we're going to compare modes by. Once I know those, then I can start to learn my modes, start to dig in and memorize these things and understand them each in their own way. So a major mode will be compared to the major scale. So I'm going to say, okay, 1, that's major. That's my standard for my major modes. So I've really got only 2 other major modes to learn. Okay, it's not so bad. I've got the mode on 4, the mode on 5, called Lydian and Mixolydian. Don't care about names so much today, but that's what they're called if you want to give them a name. And I've got only one exception, circled in red for your benefit, one exception to the major scale. So my 4 mode is exactly like the major scale, but it's got this sharp 4. So if I wanted to play the 4 mode, I would play the major scale off of that note, but I'm going to go ahead and sharp the 4. Okay? So in the key of C, I would have my C major scale here, and here my 4 chord would be F, or my 4 mode would be F. So band is playing an F chord now. We're in the key of C. I want to stay in the key of C. I play an F major scale, but the F major scale has a B flat in it. Wrong. Don't want a B flat in the key of C. So that B flat happens to be the 4th note in that key. So I sharp the little sucker. I make him sharp. I make him into a B flat, raised, sharped, raised a half step, right? It's not a B sharp, but it's a B flat raised by a half step into a sharp 4. That becomes a B natural. Holy moly, we're still in the key of C because I played my F major scale with a sharp 4. That's how we think about these modes. Okay, so I know my 1, that's major because I already know that today. I know my 4 because I just memorized it, and that was pretty easy, sharp 4 in the 4 mode. And I go to my 5 mode, and I say, okay, how is that different from the major scale? Well, it's got a flat 7. We don't have the sharp 4 anymore, right? No more sharp 4, but we do have that flat 7. So key of C, I'm going to play a G major scale over my G chord in the key of C. Oh no, I've got an F sharp as my 7th note. Wrong. Don't want the F sharp as my 7th note. So that F sharp, I lower that. It becomes an F. Now, a flat 7 doesn't mean a flat F. It just means whatever your 7 was in the key of G, your 7 is F sharp. You lower that by a half step, making it a flat 7. Now it's an F natural. And behold, we have notes in the key of C, and only notes in the key of C. That covers major modes. Now the minor modes. The ones in purple on this sheet. And I want to start off by telling you that if you already know your minor scale, you already know mode number 6. So there it is. Think about it. If you know the C major scale, that's all naturals. Well, if you know the A minor scale, that's also all naturals. C, D, E, F, G, A. A is number 6. That's our 6th mode. And so by definition, if I start on A and I play from A to A and I play all the naturals, that's the 6th mode of C, or the 6th mode, in this case, of a major scale. So the natural minor, or minor if you just know it as minor, but full name is natural minor. The natural minor also gets its own fancy name called Aeolian. More importantly today, it's mode number 6. So I already know the 6th mode, which means I've only got 3 more I have to learn. I've got 2, 3, and 7. Okay? Each of these will have one exception, except for the last one. So each of these has one exception to the minor mode. The 2 mode, we call them Dorian, has a raised 6. Okay? So normally minor has a flat 6, right? But this one, this flat 6 would be here, that's been raised. Now that is a major 6 in the world of naming intervals. All I have to do is play my minor scale and raise that 6. We talked about earlier that if I played a D, if we're in C here, I got C is 1, D is 2, band is playing a D minor chord. I want to play a scale that goes really well over that D minor chord that does not go out of key. And if I play a D minor scale, I'm going to be having to play a B flat, which is not the sound the band is looking for in this case. So I raise that B flat. My B flat would be right here on that flat 6, and I raise that to a B, making it a raised 6, putting me back in key. Isn't that cool? If I go down to my 3 mode now, I find that it's exactly the same as the minor scale, but with a flat 2. And that's my 3 mode. Simple as that. If I go down to my last one, I've got 2 exceptions. This is the only mode that has 2 exceptions compared to its major or minor counterpart. So minor mode, right? Flat 3. Got a flat 3 on this one. So I'm going to be thinking of this as a minor mode. I'm going to think of how does this mode or scale change compared to my minor scale? Well, it's got a flat 2 and a flat 5. And this is an excellent example. This mode shows us why I like to compare things to minor, or why most musicians would compare their minor modes to the minor scale, to the natural minor scale. And that is because it's way easier to think, oh, just play minor scale with a flat 2 and a flat 5, versus saying, well, you play the major scale C, but it's got a flat 2. Oh, it's also got a flat 3. Your 4 is the same. It's got a flat 5. It's got a flat 6. And it's got a flat 7. And by that time, your student is asleep or has walked away or whatever. So it's just, there's too much processing going on there. I don't want to have to think of my major scale with whatever 5 exceptions or 6, however many exceptions there are on there. I don't want to think of my major scale with a whole bunch of exceptions. I'll think of my minor scale, because that's my silver standard. I'll think of that scale, and I'll make just the 2 exceptions. So all said and done, this is not so bad. Let's go ahead and review. I've got 7 total modes for my major scale. Let's cross these off. Okay, let's learn these real fast. Number 1, I already know that one. That's major, because I know my major scale. Number 6, I know that one. Okay, that's just minor. I know my minor scale already. I've only got 5 left. Let's learn the majors. Okay, major modes are 4 and 5. The 4th mode has a sharp 4, and the 5th mode has a flat 7. Well, that's not too bad. What else do we have here to learn? Well, we've got our 3 other minor modes as well. My 2 mode has a raised 6. My 3 mode has that flat 2. And my infamous 7 mode, which we're not even going to see that much anyways, has a flat 2 and a flat 5. Not too bad. That's your lesson on modes for today. I hope that was helpful and instructive and cleared some stuff up. This can be really difficult to understand. Once you learn it and you look back on it, to me, like anything that I look at in music, once I learn it, it's easy. I look back and I go, wow, that's pretty simple. And it is. It's simple stuff. It's just new. You're trying to deal with this dichotomy of having the major scale, but then pulling scales out of that scale. And I have one of my major scale, which is C in this case, and then I have my 2 of my scale, which is D, but then I make a scale off of that scale, and now that 2 is 1. And the brain gets kind of addled fairly quickly. So watch this video again if you didn't soak up everything, and you will get this. You can do this. This is really not that hard. It's just new for you. If you have questions or comments, you can visit me on my website, stepbystepmusic.com, or throw them into the comment section, and I'll be happy to get back to you. So that was confusing.